Hey, everybody. This is Nicole Kaufman. I am the Right Therapist, and here today to talk to you about a topic that hits really close to home for me. And I am that therapist who will self-disclose, and I will talk about personal stories that don't have much to hide. And I think that it's relevant when a therapist can talk about things not only from a professional standpoint, but also from a personal standpoint. So today I'm talking about family shade, what to do when you are the lone voice in your family. Okay. You may be the lone voice in your family for a variety of reasons. And it could be one, politically, perhaps you are not the same as the other people in your family. It could be because you don't approve or you're not cool with the way that things are in your family. You don't like how the family operates, or you're the only one who's saying so. All right. You're the lone voice in your family that way. You could be the lone voice in your family or feel alone in your family because you are doing something different than the rest of your family. Perhaps you took a different career path or a different educational path or a different path altogether than everybody in your family, and you feel like they judge you for that. Either way, it results in feeling rather siloed in your family. And it could be with your spouse, your spousal family, your immediate family, or it could be with moms and dads. So either way, today I wanted to kind of dive into that and talk about kind of the mental health implications behind that and what we can do about it. How can we feel better about that? How can we feel a little bit more close-knit or feel like we belong again with our family members? The last year and a half has resulted in a lot of my clients coming into session saying, I don't even know who these people are anymore that I'm related to. And it could be for a variety of reasons. Could be politically, it could be because of the pandemic and the the experiences people have had around that. So what does that do to your mental health when you feel like the people you are closest to or the people that you've been conditioned to respect and obey, all of a sudden you're thinking, I don't respect these people very much, or I don't really want to do what they're asking me to do anymore. All right. So what does that look like? And I'd love for anybody in the comments, if you have a certain situation or any other scenario that you'd like to run past me, we can certainly do a 2.0, or I can answer your question next time as to how to handle these things. So, of course, I want to go to the research on what we're looking at when it comes to differences. And so why don't we just dive in real quick to the political differences? And I pulled up an article. I'll have it in the show notes that you can access to. But I did pull up an article that was actually from a few years ago. It was in Psychology Today, and it was talking about the differences between Democrats and conservatives in their brain chemistry. So this particular article was written in 2016, I believe, right before the last election. And so the author was really pretty specific in what she saw as differences between conservatives and Democrats or Republicans and Democrats. And she writes, one reason political discord can be so damaging is that we are not simply engaging in an intellectual disagreement, but rather bumping up against differences at the level of brain chemistry. The disparity between neurological responses to fearful stimuli is key. So basically what she's saying there is that Democrats and Republicans react to fear differently. And so I guess I can kind of ascribe to that a little bit. I would say most people react to fear differently. I don't think that's a huge stretch. And I don't think it really is divided so much between political parties. But she goes on and says that researchers have discovered structural brain differences between conservatives and liberals that back this up. The findings: conservative brains have more volume in their amygdala, the part of our brain that is related to emotional and fear-based learning. Their amygdala is fired at a greater rate than their Democratic counterparts. Liberal brains, on the other hand, show a larger volume in the anterior cingulate cortex. The ACC has been linked to several functions, including conflict detection, which enables us to regulate our behavior by identifying discrepancies between instinctual, habit-driven impulses and our actual intentions. Likewise, brain scans show that those who identify as liberal have their ACCs firing at a much higher rate than those who identify as conservative. So basically, the article is saying that conservatives are a little slow. That's what I'm reading. Maybe it's not saying that, but that's kind of how it's nodding to me. Then she says, when we have political debates, we're not only operating in terms of our beliefs and values, but also our psychology and biology in terms of the way we perceive and respond to others and the world around us. So the article goes further to say that conservatives and Republican, or conservatives or Republicans are much more neurotic, as in the clinical term. We're more prone to fear and affected by fear and more reactive, whereas liberals are more or less reactive or less fear-based. And that was written in 2016. So my challenge to that and my thoughts for that go along these lines. So I'm thinking, I'm thinking about the protests and riots that came about last year that resulted in roughly $5 billion of uninsured property damage. And to me, that was a really reactive, fear-based response, and tinged with a lot of violence for what was going on last summer in response to, I guess, the George Floyd, perhaps in response to what was happening in the country at large. All that to say, to me, it was it flies in the face of the research that is here, that liberals are less reactive and conservatives are more reactive. So I do challenge that a little bit. And I don't think that the author has any ill intent, but I would go further to come at this from a mental health perspective that basically says that we need to take in nature and nurture when it comes to approaching an argument or approaching discussion with family members about differences, whether they be political, whether they be lifestyle, whether they be, career-based, anything that happens to come up as an issue in our family. All right. So everybody is pretty much familiar with the nature-nurture argument that is at play for most mental health. And so the nature-nurture pretty much goes like this. Nature, as in you're born this way, your brain makeup and your brain chemistry is what it is. We really can't change that. Nurture is the environment in which you're raised, the behaviors that you learned, and the habits that you have practiced, habits and behaviors over time that basically make up your personality. So the thinking is that nature can be changed, or nature cannot be changed. Nurture can be influenced and changed. And so when we get into a political argument or a difference of opinion with family members over bigger, more global issues, we have to take these two things into account. So if I am at odds, let's say, or have a difference of opinion with my brother, for instance. Now, my brother and I will be the first to tell you, we are diametrically opposed when it comes to our political views. Both of us will say we don't know how this happened because we were raised in the same family. And maybe you are thinking the same thing about yours. We don't know how this happened. We were raised by an extremely Republican father. Mom, I would say she was more independent than really left or right leaning. Dad was one of those who listened to Rush Limbaugh every single day. And he was also, to me, just larger than life. He was a Green Beret in Vietnam, and Dad had very definite opinions on how he felt about our country in terms of patriotism and being a patriot and being a hard worker, etc. And so my brother and I were raised in the same family. Quick story. When I was in, I want to say 9th grade, I was learning civics class. We were talking about types of government. And I will never forget this. I wrote an essay as a 15-year-old. I think I was 15. I might have been in middle school. It doesn't matter. I was young. And just learning about politics, just learning about government in school. And I remember I remember my instructor talking about communism and socialism. And what struck me about it at the time was the behind the theory was the idea of fairness. And it seemed to me in my undeveloped brain at the time that how awesome would it be that everybody got everything fairly, and that fairness was a good thing? How could fairness not be bad? All right. And it just seemed that, okay, everybody, then there would be no poor people. Then there would be nobody who missed out. Okay. So for my thought process at 14, 15 years old, fairness sounded really good. And I wrote an essay arguing the point that this was really how things should be, because, fairness above all should be what we're striving for, right? And at the time, I remember somehow, I guess my dad saw it, or I read it to him or something like that. I knew that his head probably exploded, but he was really gracious at the time. And I think he asked me a couple of questions about it, but he didn't explode on me, because I think he thought at the time that how could I know enough to be 100% certain about that opinion at the time. So he was pretty gracious, I think. I think more gracious than I would be right now if my son wrote such a thing. In full transparency, in all honesty, I would probably be pretty strong with my opinions, but he let me write it, and he let me have that opinion. And as I got older, my opinions and my thought processes definitely shifted. And so I want to introduce the concept of grace. You'll hear me use that a lot on this program. My dad gave me grace in that instance to think my thoughts for the time being. And when we're at odds, or when we're with family members who do think differently than we do, I would invite you to use a little bit of grace with that person. They may not know, just as I didn't at that age, that their opinions maybe were not fully informed and were not fully formed at that time. Okay. So if you've got someone who is half your age or much younger, all right, or who is just kind of dipping their toe into political discourse, then, they may not know as much or have fully formed opinions yet. And that's okay, right? It is not an invitation for you to come down on them with a ton of facts and judgment. Okay. They're allowed to still form their opinions. And I would like to think that we can give some grace with ourselves, in as much as our opinions can shift and change, just as mine did in a huge way from the time I was 14, 15 years old to even now. My opinions on lots of social issues and economic issues have really evolved over time. And so are we allowing the rest of the people in our midst to have that same experience? So with my brother, I will go back to that. We have gotten into it. Let me just tell you, we have gone toe to toe and argued at the Thanksgiving dinner table, unfortunately, really got incensed and dug our heels in on the way that we feel about domestic policy, foreign policy, economics, et cetera. And it really came down to a character assassination on both of our parts. This would be probably about 20 years ago when he and I really got into it. I will say that we ended up having a 2-year kind of hiatus on contact with each other. Maybe it was not quite 2 years, but we really hurt each other's feelings to the extent that we didn't want to talk to each other. And those were the lost years between my brother and I that I regret. I will definitely say I regret that. It wasn't worth it to have lost touch with him over that time period. And, one of the things that I think falls under the umbrella of grace is to remember that even if people have different ideas from you, they are people with different ideas, not bad people with ideas. Okay. And I want you to make that distinction. These are people who have a different experience than you, who have a different mindset and a different outlook than you. And yours doesn't make it, your mindset or your perspective is not necessarily right. It's just yours. Okay. And giving them grace to have the chance to have their opinions evolve, and yours might evolve too, is what we're here for, is to live, is kind of live together. I hate to kumbaya it here online. But it, the other side of this coin, though, is that we don't want to be abused either. So to the extent that you are being ganged up on, perhaps in your family, that you are being somehow ostracized in your family for your opinions, not necessarily for much else, but all of a sudden your existence and your opinions is now othered. That can be a really lonely feeling. And you don't have to apologize for that. All right. And it cuts both ways. All right. So feeling like you have to apologize for, thinking or feeling a certain way is, especially if it's in, your own house or in, when you're having a family gathering, we can hopscotch over that topic, maybe change the subject is always a good way to go about this. Or talk about, some other things that are a little more tepid and not as pointed in terms of content. for your family members. So I'd like to introduce grace. I'd like to talk about also, using the skill and strategy of subject changing. And when it comes down to advocating for yourself, facts don't care about your feelings, right? And that what Ben Shapiro says, facts don't care about your feelings. The more facts you have to back up what you're saying, if it does come to a point where you need to defend yourself, go to the research, go to the facts, go to the current statistics, the data, right? And to the extent that you can use that data to defend yourself or to state what you are saying without going for the jugular, without it becoming a look back into the past. Well, the reason that you feel this way is what I hear a lot of people say. And then all of a sudden, what happens? People are looking into the rear view, into childhood history, or to events that happened in the past. And then it becomes a character assassination on the grandest of scales. So let's not do a look back. We can state our opinion, fairly and plainly, and maybe use a fact or two to back that up. And, that's how I feel right now. And it can be right now. Right? Did you notice how I qualified that? This is how I feel right now about how things are going. I would take a mean tweet and $1.79 gas prices right now. Okay. That's just me. And that's how I feel about it. And there are other people who feel differently, and I'm comfortable with my own opinion on that. Okay. And one of the other researchers and authors that I like is Dr. Lindsay Gibson. Dr. Gibson writes a book called Adult Children of Emotionally Immature Parents. And we run into emotionally immature parents sometimes, or emotionally immature adults, probably on a regular basis. And emotionally immature folks tend to think the world kind of revolves around them. And if I say something enough, or if I posit my opinion enough, it will make it true, or you have to agree with me because I'm the one who's saying this, and it's my way or the highway type thinking. And it's hard as a person who may have a personality trait of wanting harmony, of wanting everybody to get along, of wanting to talk about things in order to resolve them. And so if communication is your strong suit, that super trait of yours might be kind of bite you in the butt for being able to resolve issues, because that's your go-to. And sometimes there's just no talking with people, especially if they're emotionally immature. So Lindsay Gibson writes out, and I'm reading it here, a Bill of Rights for folks that you have in a discussion, or when you're in conversation with other people, and if it can get heated or if it can get adversarial, I want you to remember these rights, okay? And I'm going to go through them real quickly. You have the right to set limits, all right? And specifically, you have the right to stop anything long before you feel exhausted. So if you get into a toe-to-toe, or if you get into what feels like a political debate with a family member or a spouse, you have the right to stop that before you get triggered, before you feel drained, okay? You also have the right to call a halt to enter into action that you don't find enjoyable. If it is that every encounter with one particular individual ends up heated, ends up feeling not good, okay, you don't have to be there the whole time. You can set very specific time limits as to how long you spend in that person's company, if at all. You have the right to opt out if you don't want to, okay? But you do have that right as an adult, that if you're not enjoying yourself, don't stick around. You can opt out. You also have the right to say no to anything, and you don't need to have a good reason. All right. For instance, I'm not going to talk about that right now. That's not something I want to discuss. All right. That's a no. All right. Another one of your rights is the right to emotional autonomy and mental freedom. You have the right to feel or think anything. You really do. And you have the right to no ridicule or mockery of your values, ideas, or interests. So if they're different, if they're not the same, all right, you still have the right to have them. And even if they are separate and apart from your family members. You have the right to know how you feel. Specifically, you have the right to be bothered by how you're treated. So if you are being othered in your family for a specific reason, if you are feeling outcast, all right, you have the right to feel that and to bring it to everybody's attention. I'm not feeling so welcome here. All right. But we bring it to everybody's attention in a straightforward fashion. We don't tell a family member so that it'll get back to the other family member that was making us feel unwelcome. Okay. We don't create that drama triangle. We go directly to the source. Remember that. You also have the right for clear communication, meaning I have the right to say anything as long as I do it in a non-violent, non-abusive way. All right. I have the right to ask to be listened to. All right. You don't want to be disregarded. I have the right to speak up and tell you if my feelings are hurt. If it didn't feel good, I get to say that. All right. And then finally, the right to choose what's best for me. I have the right to opt out of any activity or get-togethers that I don't find enjoyable. So if family get-togethers are becoming contentious, if they're becoming more of a chore, all right, it's not worth it. And I have a lot of my clients tell me, well, I have to be there. It would look bad if I didn't show up, right? And you can show up, but put a time limit on it, 15 minutes, 30 minutes, or I'm going to opt out of this one. I'll be at the next one. Check in with yourself and see how you feel. If you're just not feeling it, if it was a trying, hard week at work, if you've been saddled with the kids and your brains are feeling like scrambled eggs all week because of this weather and the kids have been out of school or on remote learning, you don't have to say yes to all of the things. Okay. Maybe we can get together next time and you'll be in a better frame of mind. All right. Saying no is a strength. All right. Remember that. So whether it's values or experiences or choices that people have made, people are going to come at differences of opinion and differences of, politics in a very different fashion. So remember the grace. Remember, let's just change the subject. It's not worth dying on this hill or sacrificing this entire relationship, right, for just a difference of opinion. Now, I'm going to take that back just a little bit and talk about if you're single and dating, if you don't have somebody who is somewhat aligned with you in terms of morals, values, and perhaps that bleeds over into a political party, I would think it might, then it's probably going to be a little difficult to pursue a romantic relationship with that person. So, finding alignment there might be in on either side of the coin, whether it's Democrat or Republican, and it might be to your advantage to align accordingly. And we're seeing even so on a lot of the dating apps, caveats on people's profiles that says, if you voted for Trump, swipe left. I don't even want to talk to you. And so, okay, no problem. But, if you can be open enough to have a discussion, that might be, we can't choose our family, we can choose our spouse, and we can choose who we're dating or who we're in romantic relationship with. So that's my one caveat here on trying to get along and using grace and using those Bill of Rights for yourself. So go out and buy Dr. Lindsay Gibson's books, her book, Adult Children of Emotionally Immature Parents. If you think that you might have some emotionally immature folks in your family, it's a fantastic read. So I'll endorse that. And I'm at my 30-minute mark. So I think I've nailed it for today. Again, this is Nicole Kaufman, the Right Therapist. If you want to find me, put in the Right Therapist, go to the Conservative Take. And also, I am located here in Greensboro, North Carolina. You can look up Nicole Kaufman, Greensboro, North Carolina. I have my own private practice, high performance counseling. So my Facebook page is pretty active with lots of articles posted for further reading, and put some questions, comments below. And I do read those, and I would love to hear what you think. So y'all go have a fantastic weekend, and we'll see you next time on The Right Therapist. Thanks so much.